Do you love traveling, exploring, and relaxing? Do you hate the loud, obnoxious, stupid tourists trying to ruin your vacation? Or maybe you might be working in the tourism industry and you want someone to confirm your suspicions. If so, this is the reason you clicked on this video. To figure out the cause, the origin, the patient zero of this experience. Which tourists are the absolute worst? Because you, without knowing, could be one of them too. Scary stuff, I know. Here's a disclaimer. Most people from the countries I'm gonna mention are really good people and do not adhere to what I'm about to say. But there are exceptions of people that act a certain way, which is characteristic of the countries they come from. And any generalizations made are for emphasis and dramatization. With all that said, I can be as controversial as I want because we're gonna start with a country that has been very controversial in the past years. And it's no other country than So for context, I used to work at a 5-star hotel, and in those months, these so-called God's chosen people were about 75% of the guests, and as I started working there at the breakfast buffet, I was wondering why my co-workers really hated serving these people from that country, to a point where I thought that my co-workers were racists. Austrian painter type racists. But as time went on, I became a racist as well. This group of people would go to the buffet, take every food item they could fit in their plate, and even more than that, like the way they still land, and then place it on the table, just eat one piece of what they just put on the plate, and then leave. And the table, bruh. Oh god, the table. The table looked like a battlefield that has been invaded. It looked like it had been drone strike. It looked like it had 40,000 casualties and still counting. It looked like it had been bombed with the help of the United States. Because it looked like fucking God. And to top it all off, every time we brought them coffee, they would take a sip and ask for a new one. But extra hot. Like hell nah, how hot can a coffee even get? And to top it all off again, part 2, the sequel, if they ever remember to leave a tip, they would leave it somewhere in that Warzone table under some crumbs and extra hot coffee just for us to find 2 cents. You heard that right? 2 fucking cents. Which I mean, they're not helping themselves beat the allegations, you know? And to top it all off again, part 3, the trilogy. Whenever they go to a restaurant, they almost always want to change the ingredients of the menu, even when the restaurant's policy doesn't allow for changes. And they give that dumb excuse that, in my country, always change and replicate the ingredients of the menu. Well, in your country, you do a lot of dumb shit, but that doesn't mean that you can do that shit in every country. Also, they're quite loud. And speaking of loud, we gotta talk about the next group.
China, China, China.
I love China. China is a beautiful and great country. Chinese people are very friendly and nice.
The Chinese. Wherever you go, you will definitely encounter a Chinese tourist. Or should I say, a huge-ass group of them. Even if you go to some of the most bizarre random village in northeast Belarus, as long as there's a Chinese restaurant nearby, you will definitely find them feasting, finishing the entire Chinese beer stock of the country. But personally, I haven't interacted much with Chinese tourists at my work and the next people I'm gonna talk about. So I asked a couple of friends, and the first thing they told me is that the Chinese are very loud and yet really hard to communicate to, with the worst part being that they usually don't speak any English. So what that means is that they use an Alibaba or whatever translator they have and are still unable to communicate with the waiters. Also, one of my friends had to serve a family of Chinese tourists who came to eat, leaving the kids basically unattended, making a mess all over the restaurant. But not just that, the adults were messier than the actual kids. Like, bruh, the adults gotta chill. Also, when came time to pay, they had the audacity to complain about why the check was so expensive, even though they had checked the menu beforehand, having my friend explain one by one what they have ordered and how much each item cost. Oh yeah, and they never leave a tip. Even though they should be getting roasted like a pecking duck, I still want to keep my social credit score somewhat high, so I'm gonna say that they're still useful for something. Because if you ever need a picture taken, you can just ask a Chinese tourist to take a picture of you. As for some reason, they have maxed out the entire photography skill tree. It doesn't matter what camera or phone you have, it might be an iPhone 16 Pro Max or a Game Boy camera, because it is sure that you are gonna have people glazing, sending unsolicited pictures from posting the photo that Chinese tourist took of you. And that is all thanks to the Chinese government, to the CCP, that is allegedly so good at using cameras to spy on their citizens that this skill has been trickled down to the regular folk too. Enough China simping, because next we gotta talk about China's main ops, the Indians. We all know about the Indian street food cleanliness, but the tourists, man, the tourists, they are so dumb that they don't even know what kind of restaurant they're stepping into. Like, my friend has been asked by an Indian tourist if they can order coffee and chips in a sushi restaurant with the word Tokyo in its name. Like, my brother in Vishnu, it's got the name Tokyo for a reason. And that's not because Japan is famous for their coffee. And also, just like the previous two, they're also super stingy, as my friend always has to explain every single detail in the bill to them every time, as if they haven't gotten paid with enough gift cards by working for Microsoft. Plus, it's quite funny to think about how similar they are with the Chinese tourists, while their governments have some of the biggest beef without going into war in the 21st century. And speaking of beef, you know what goes well with beef? Fries. Where do fries come from? That's right, Belgium. Anyway, let's talk about fries. And where do I even start with this one? Fries should be deleted, removed from existence, uninstalled from this world. They are just the worst people, and not just in terms of attitude. Because I was once in the museum. Okay, I shouldn't read it like this. Because I was once in the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao with my friends, where we were at the top floor and we wanted to go down to the ground floor to leave. So we headed to the elevators, where we just saw a group of guys that just exited the elevator. We heard them speaking French, so we knew something was up. Because as they passed next to us, we were hit with the slight whiff of, let's call it, je ne sais quoi, in a bad way. But we wanted to go down, so we entered the elevator, and there we were hit by not just a whiff, but a whole nuclear bomb of the worst body odor imaginable. Let me tell you, the elevator was cooked. The French have violated the Geneva Convention. They filled the entire elevator with poisonous gas. I thought only the Germans could leave a room like that, so we got out of there so fast. Usain Bolt retired from running, and Jaguar removed the Jaguar from their logo. There's seriously no words to describe that smell. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if just one person got out of the elevator, but a group of them not noticing even the slightest hint of stink? Brother, the French noses are built different, man, I swear. And I'm not even finished, because when you have to serve a French person speaking in English, they almost always reply to you in French. Like, what the fuck, man? I know you understand me in English, and I know you do speak English. So why are you trying to fool me into parlaying Francais? Rah! I swear they are too proud of their country and language, even though they sound like they are choking on some of that le dick. And if you ever catch them speaking in English, they always start with is possible? Then they say what they want, like on coca, with coca meaning Coca-Cola, and not that magical leaf from Latin America. But the next ones might not be the worst in a traditional sense, but they are annoyingly stupid and stupidly loud. The Americans.
We endure, we come, we are America, second to none.
First of all, I want to start this by saying that they're usually really friendly, in a fake way in some cases. But brother, kindness can't save you from the damage Red 3, Red 40, and the American media has done to your brain. How can half of them believe that they live in the best country in the world while not knowing jack shit about the other countries? That is, till they book a trip to a country called Europe, or Africa, or maybe Asia. What the hell? So there was that one time I was working at a bar, and the only customers were some good old American Marines. They were being loud, as Americans always do. But when they were about to pay, they asked me for recommendations for some good place for some good steak. And I told them that I didn't know. And so one of them said something along the lines of, "Oh, You've not had steak before? You're poor? Here's 50 euros for you to get some steak.
I thought that I've been hurt before.
And until that moment, I have never wanted to think and sucker punch someone in the face at the same time. Like, do they think themselves of some kind of charity? Do they seriously think that not having steak is being poor? I swear, the founding fathers did not die for this attitude. And speaking of broke, we gotta talk about the
This is the strong sperm, this is the Greek god, okay? Greek god.
Greeks and Cypriots. There's a saying that says that the Greeks invented the orgies, but the Romans brought the women. The Greeks sound kinda gay. Anyway, being born and raised in Greece, I can say with 100% certainty that the Greeks are very hospitable. But man, if Greeks are your guests, then good luck even dealing with them. I've worked as a waiter in Greek weddings, and I've seen some of the worst behaviors, being disrespectful for no reason, to flooding the buffet because of that Balkan mentality that a second sitting the fuck down waiting is a second lost from your life. Also being racist. In one of those weddings I served, one of the guests called me to their table so we can take a photo together. And that's not because I'm famous, but that's because, in her words, her daughter loves Chinese people. Well, I'm not even Chinese, and her daughter probably loves BTS, who are Korean. I know what I mentioned wasn't about Greek tourists, so I asked my Italian cousin, who worked for Ryanair, in Thessaloniki of all places, and she said that Greeks had no manners, were rude, and expect luxury from a fucking Ryanair flight. Astaghfirullah. And from my experience, seeing Greeks abroad as tourists seems to me like monkeys coming out of a jungle, because the infrastructure here is so shit that even the most basic things, like crossing the road with no fear, seems like magic to them. I remember seeing a Greek couple in Copenhagen trying to bike on the sidewalk, while a literal bike lane was right next to the sidewalk they were struggling with. Let's not forget about the Cypriots. They are literally the same people, with the only difference being is that they have that goofy ass accent that is barely intelligible. It's like if you compare the LA super zesty accent to the Scouse accent that fucks sheep.
Honorable mention.
The Arabs, when husband's not around. So my friend recommended this to me because they can be quite rude and act so spoiled when their man isn't there to discipline them. In a halal way, of course. But even though I don't have much experience with them, I do agree that they are quite cold once you meet them. But once they warm up to you, they are decent people. So make of that as you will. You thought I was gonna leave this video without including the British people? Just kidding, they are chill. Maybe except this guy. But there is a whole entire subspecies of Brits, which is a whole different story, called British lads. It's like the yin and the yang, where the British people are red from sitting in the sun for too long in the beaches of Mallorca, and the British lads are red because of that piled up anger from getting sucker punched in the face. Because they are some of the most disrespectful people out there, not caring about how drunk they get and about their actions while being drunk. And I'm not just talking about screaming jingle bells in the streets in the middle of the summer. I mean pissing wherever they want and somehow being the #1 cause of people fighting in the pubs. And there's no wonder that Amsterdam has installed street toilets so that the drunk British lads could take a piss in the street without drowning in the canals. Oh yeah, and there's one more group I want to mention, and it's the